Good evening and welcome once again to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. I'll be your host for the next hour. As you know, a major issue that has been facing the public's interest is this question of the introduction of value-added tax on education. I emphasize education because it's not limited to private education. Earlier today, Wednesday, there was a protest outside the offices of the Minister of Education, Dr. Rupert Rupnarayan, who is also a co-leader of the Working People's Alliance. The protest lasted 1.5 hours. Sorry, it lasted 1 hour. It was sponsored by a group of parents and students, supported by the educators. And on Plain Talk this evening, I want to introduce 3 of those persons who will be with us for the next hour. The center, ladies always first, Ms. Savita Gowkarran. She's a parent of twin girls. Girls, right?
Yes. Twin girls.
You wouldn't want to believe that, but that's so. On my immediate left, Mr. Roodi Balgobin, who is a student at the School of the Nations. And on the extreme left, Dr. Brian O'Toole, educator and founder principal of School of the Nations. Welcome all.
Thank you
for having us.
Dr. O'Toole, I'll start with you because at your school, the School of the Nations, an initiative had begun regarding a petition. Could you tell us very briefly what that petition was about and what's the status of the petition?
Sure. Something like 15,000 people have signed the petition from all corners of Guyana, all different political backgrounds, but as well, not just from Guyana, people from about 40 different countries have also signed. And interestingly, with the I-petition, there are about 1,500 comments as well. And those comments are really quite extraordinary. I mean, they're all about how illogical it is. We're talking about progress, that the last thing you're going to do is to hit people with fees for private education when they're already paying very substantial amounts of tax. So we submitted that to the President, to Minister Jordan.
When was it submitted?
About 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. It's still ongoing, so still people are signing up. And so Minister Jordan has now put it in the hands of Minister Rupnarayan, and he's to meet with a delegation of us to see how we're going to move forward. I mean, that's more than 2% of the population signed that petition.
Well, the Minister Jordan, he actually responded. So the president, you presented the petition to the president.
Yes.
He passed you to the Minister of Finance.
We presented it at the same time to the President, Minister Jordan, and Minister Rupnarayan.
And the matter, as far as you know, is in the hands of Minister Rupnarayan.
Yes.
And it has been for 2.5 weeks.
A bit less than that, so we're waiting now for the date for that meeting.
Well, has he given an indication of a date as yet?
No, a request is going to go to him to say, when is the meeting? We're waiting.
But that request has already been made with the petition. Was that your understanding?
Yes, and now it's in his court to respond, and because we haven't had a response, now we're going to ask, when is the date of that meeting?
Right, comments, Mr. Balgobin, Ms. Gowkarran?
Yeah, sure. First off, thank you for having us, and I'd like to start by saying that we must recognize that education is the surest and most proven way to eradicate poverty in a third world country in Guyana. And it's against these types of backdrop that governments are encouraged to accord the highest priority to education. And surely what is happening here is something else being reflected. In my own view, surely the current administration don't care for the future of Guyana because the children are the future of the country. And to place tax on or VAT on education, the future of this country, clearly shows that they do not care about the country and the future.
Ms. Gowkarran?
With the petitions being handed in over to our party at this moment, I really truly thought that we would have gained empathy at this point in time when they had seen that 1,500 persons,
15,000.
15,000 persons are now in a disagreement of what the decision that they have been
In a
made.
written way, because it's more than 15,000
Who were exactly, but
who would
these
have
were
been
the
protesting.
actual facts. These were the actual signatures that they had gotten at hand at this point in time, and I would thought that they would have been very empathetic, but they didn't. Rather the fact they have gotten very insensitive to the matter, whereas our minister said that if we can afford to send our children to these private schools, we can afford the 14% VAT. And I found that very insensitive on his part, because a lot of these parents, they don't know the struggles that these parents are going through to send these children to school. They don't know the sacrifices and the simple luxuries that they're depriving themselves from to make ends meet, to have that school fee paid at the end of the term. And I was very upset when that happened.
Well, and I think with good reason, Ms. Gowkarran, because I myself, and this is years and years and years ago, but I'm the product of in those days they had some kind of state-aided school, but I got a partial scholarship. I was a pretty poor student in school. I never liked authority. And I managed to scrape a partial scholarship, and even with a partial scholarship to Cambridge Academy. It took my grandfather, my mother, and my eldest brother to pool their resources.
Exactly.
Some want to buy these shoes, want to buy books, and want to pay the school fees. And that I am sure that we are living through that still, whether both in urban and rural areas.
Some parents doesn't have things as Wi-Fi or cable service at home, because that incurs a structured cost at the end of the month. They do not have those simple luxuries they're doing without.
Well, I'm not sure even now those would be considered luxuries, because a kid has homework. Generally has the internet is one of the great sources
Exactly.
of education material.
I think the thing that really hit me, Chris, is the poverty of the debate here. That we present a petition signed by more than 2% of the population, and then the response is, well, if you can, as Cindy says, if you can afford private education, then you can afford more. Then another argument was, well, let the schools pay. We're already paying 35% tax. That's such a facile thing to say. And then, what if then people decide to go back to the public school system? There's no way the public
Cannot
schools can
absorb them.
accommodate them.
They can't.
It's because of the inadequacies there. If you took private lessons out of the equation for the best schools,
Even for the public schools.
the results would be atrocious, and people know that.
Mr. Balgobin, tell us from your perspective as may I say mature student,
Yeah.
in terms of financing private education. What's the struggle like?
Well, I'm working full-time currently. I'm an MBA student at School of the Nations, and I'm working full-time currently to pay for my education. Apart from that, I have many other expenses, food, rent, and all these other things. I have to pay for my books. One of the books is about $40,000. And now to go and find an extra 14%, so pay at the end of every month is very, very hard. And as you know, it's not just, we can't just look at the education alone, the tax on education alone. There have been many other increases across the board in Ghana, and not very much increase in the salaries. And well, it results in lack of disposable income. And now to put the tax on education is very rough, very hard.
Ms. Gowkarran, what does it say to you that I don't know whether you followed politics, but the
Not
WPA, but it's not a bad thing. You have a role in society. Every one of us does. But the political party, the Working People's Alliance, of which Dr. Roop Narayan has been co-leader for such a long time, this ball is in his court.
yes.
He's a senior cabinet member. He can go to the Minister of Education, the Minister of Finance, and say, look, when I weigh all the issues from an educational perspective,
Yes.
this thing is bad. Let us reverse it. He can talk to the president. how disappointed are you
I'm,
that the Working People's Alliance, Rupner Ryan himself?
I'm very, really and truly, I'm very disappointed because, they did not. They really and truly did not put any consideration as to how this is going to affect our children socially, how it's going to affect us financially. They just picked up a calculator, saw their calculation done in front of them, and came to the conclusion that, okay, this is going to better our economy at this point in time, so we're going to add this. Our Minister of Education needs to understand, and he needs to know that these are our future. This is Guyana's future, and for him not to take a stand in the matter at this point in time is very disappointing to all of the parents. We're still waiting for him to come out and say something to us, issue a statement. What is it?
Well, to meet with you to start with, extend common courtesies.
What are you planning to do about it? Because this does not affect them financially. What happens when we take our children out of these private schools and put them in the public schools, and we don't have? How do we put them into a class where they're not? The curriculum is not up to date, and we have our students
The resources, the teachers are
or
not
we-
satisfied with their pay.
or we have the students that needs that extra push. How are they going to be able to differentiate between the two? They're not able to handle what is already been, what is in the school system as it is. So how this, you cannot put a child in a private school and then take them out with, just saying.
But in any case, just the practicality of it. What do? Suddenly, in the middle of a term, you take a child out and put them into a completely different environment.
Because
How does that? You're an educator, Dr. O'Toole. Tell us what you think the impact of such a stupid piece of action would be.
Well, I mean, it's totally impractical. The public school system does not have the capacity to absorb the number of
But
students.
even if it
that are
did,
in these 58
my
schools.
question is, even if it did, what impact is that going to have? Students
Psychologically.
Well,
they're being pulled out of one
yeah.
environment into a completely
Yeah.
different environment.
Well, I mean, I think all of us have got to reflect and see why are our children in public schools? That at Nations, now we've been going 20 years, we have a number of children there from people of the highest background, from all political parties.
Yes.
So if indeed the public school system is doing so well, why have they themselves chosen to send their kids to private school? It just isn't logical. Maybe very quickly, Chris, I could share, we have a research arm at Nations. The British government, about 10 or 15 years ago, commissioned us to undertake quite a large survey of the literacy needs in Upper Quarantine and in Upper Demerara. We had a standardized test that was recognized internationally, and we found that 20% of 12-year-old children that we dealt with couldn't read one single word.
Did you? That's bad enough. But did you do any further progression? Like how much could be considered an average good reader?
But I mean, to think
At what percent?
every fifth child who's been in school for 7 years.
That's
can't read
zero.
one word.
No, but I'm talking 10%, 15%.
But I mean, it didn't need to go beyond that because that was so appalling. The minister at the time was Dale Bisnort. We took the findings to him. It was the front page on the Chronicle the next day. And by the second day, of course, they realized that they'd been in power for several years and that it wasn't the kind of news that they wanted. So it wasn't given the coverage that it should. But, I mean, those statistics are as bad as anywhere in the world.
How many, to the best of your knowledge, how many private schools are there, and with how many kids attending those schools?
I don't know. I mean, I've just seen in the media the talk that there's supposed to be 58 private schools. And of course, there's a range. There's 3 or 4 bigger ones, and there's a lot of bottom house type. The interesting statistic that is mooted all the time is that out of those 58, 8 are tax compliant, which I find very confusing. I mean, if that's the case, make it a level playing field. We are more than happy to pay the income tax, the corporation tax. But if now our competitors aren't, how is that just? And then the conclusion to that, according to some of the ministers, is that those of us who are paying should now pay another 14%. I mean, totally illogical.
Yeah, in terms of the number of students, is there any indication of how many, apart from the number of schools?
Not quite sure,
Not
but
quite
thousands.
Thousands,
Thousands,
yes.
Sorry?
Thousands.
It'd be thousands.
But if I could just add, Mr. Ram, you're a tax expert, and
I
yeah,
never consider myself an
and
expert.
an
on
attorney at
anything.
law, and I mean, no one has done any assessment to see if collecting more taxes as against the implications this would have to society. I mean, this is education. It will result in higher dropout rates in school if you can't afford to go to school. And then we know that the public school system have, it's not equipped to deal with the amount of students and the needs of the students. So really, just to go full steam ahead and implement VAT on private education is really a wrong move, I would say.
It, it is a wrong move, and it comes right back again to the Minister of Education, because if the President and the Minister of Finance have now said, look, Rupert Ryan, handle this, you would have thought he should have.
Yes, yes. I
There's
would have thought
absolutely
that.
no, it's diabolical that Rupert Ryan, as Minister of Education, should keep the parents and children waiting on an issue in which he has to make a decision.
But I think it can take any one of them. We have a fragile coalition. One person with courage, integrity, could get up and say, I don't agree.
Yes.
As far as I've seen, nobody has said that. And maybe all of us need to examine, well, why is that the case?
Well, you're quite right, Dr. O'Toole. I'm not sure the fragility. They seem to be operating, as President Grange always said, we're a solid coalition, solid with a majority of one. Has there been any effort to speak to the individual parties in this coalition government?
No, none.
On behalf of
And shouldn't that be something to be done?
I think, our hope was in presenting such a broad base of concern that would be enough. And then when we heard that President Granger had had decided to remove that, of course we all celebrated.
Yes.
And then 2 days later, we see that was either misinformation, a la the American model, or it was a very clever move to take away a lot of enthusiasm from that movement.
Yes.
But whatever it is, it was quite extraordinary. If indeed the feedback was that the president was going to make that change, and then 2 days later, it was actually, no, I've changed my mind.
Well, you raised the cynical question as to whether the purpose of that announcement was to dampen any enthusiasm for protesting. As you said, a couple of weeks maybe have passed. What is the enthusiasm? What is the level of resistance, perhaps, of parents and students to this tax at this point? Have they been nullified, or have they been emboldened? Use today as an example, Ms. Gowkarran.
Our parents have been, what can I say? They're not educated to the fact how the VAT is being applied. Because of the press conference that our Minister of Finance had, they are now, the billions of dollars they put out there in front of the camera that these private schools are now making, parents want the school to absorb the VAT. We had our PTA meeting at Mays where we informed them of how the VAT is being implemented and how it's a consumer VAT. All these things were being discussed at our PTA meeting. At our school, our parents joined forces they wanted to protest. They wanted to come out and protest right away. Due to that, because we knew Dr. O'Toole had started the petitions before, we were waiting for him after he had sent those in, and then, it was just sitting there at that point in time. We decided to reach out to Dr. O'Toole and his team at Nations and start and form the Private Schools United, whereas all the parents has a place of medium where they can come and they can vent their frustration. Some of the parents they're at the point where, as what they see going on with the parking meters, they're at the point where they say, you know what, we're just going to have to pay it and be done with it. And some of the parents they're very much angry because they think that this is a basic necessity. And, for them to tax our education is just ludicrous.
Just to add to that, this is a basic necessity education, and
It's not only a basic necessity; it's a human right.
Right.
yes, it's
Exactly.
exactly. I mean,
It's one of your fundamental human rights.
the United Nations, through its arm like UNESCO, these
Oh,
are the agendas they push in these countries. to
Believe me,
access
our
to education.
constitution makes it one.
Yes,
So
I
there's
know
no
that as
question
well, yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and from a moral perspective, it's just wrong. I mean, everyone can agree with that. That anyone in the government, whether they're for or against it, from a moral perspective, is just wrong.
Yeah.
To tax children,
I think it's interesting, Chris, in the very limited debate that there's been on this issue. Only a couple of factors have really been looked at. One of the ones that we highlighted early on is that there's more than 1,000 people in Ghana doing what's called ABE qualifications.
Exactly.
And you know, much of the prejudice is that they will look at the car park at Mays or our school or whatever and they'll see some fancy cars there. And the perception is, you know, it's a group of rich people. They don't see the people that come by bicycle. They don't see the people that drop their children by taxi. But sorry, Chris, if I just finish this point, is that with the ABE program, these are school leavers that pay their school fees in small dollar bills. And that for them, it's not a choice to pay 14% more. They simply cannot.
In any case, why should a government feel jealous of people driving a motor car?
Yeah, it's very sad.
I mean, what kind of mentality
Yeah.
is that?
It's very sad.
You should be proud that under your administration,
Exactly.
people can drive cars.
yes.
To say that, oh, I am going to tax you, it's almost an act of spite.
We had a public meeting. We've had a few with our parents. At one of them, at the end of the meeting, somebody put their hand up and said, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm a member of the government, and I'd like to apologize because my prejudice was that this is a school full of rich, spoiled children. Now that my child is here, I know that that's incorrect. And I thought, well, God bless you for having the honesty to get up and say that. But also, how sad is it that we live in a society where that prejudice definitely does exist? And instead of seeing, well, what contribution is that making? I mean, all you have to do is to look at the results over the past decade, and you'll see May's school is right up there every single year. So
And you'll be modest school of the nations as well. Yes,
sure,
yes.
but and then you'll see a letter in the press from one of the leading lines that decries that, and it is absolutely not based on facts to say that the private schools have done a tremendous amount to enrich the examination results in this country.
I'll come back to you, Cindy. What do you think about the activity today? And for the viewers, there was a protest in front of the Ministry of Education, and it now appears extremely legitimate and appropriate that it be there because the ball has been passed to the Minister of Education to resolve this issue. What's your take on today's activity?
I was very proud of our parents. I was very proud of everyone who came out and supported what's going on. I cannot stress enough about people who are picking their children up and coming out with them. I know a lot of people are getting criticized because they're walking with their children at these protests, but they have to choose between having their children there or attending the protests at all at this point. My parents were all of the school parents were very, very, very adamant about the idea of continuing the protest until we get some sort of answer, until we have a sit down with the respective administrations and our minister, so he can see not just the ballpoint figure in front of him, that he can actually see how this is affecting the smaller people. It's affecting children in tertiary level. It's affecting mothers and fathers who are really and truly barely making ends meet. It's affecting grandparents who are taking their pensions out to send their grandchildren to school. We had one of the protesters today. He was of that.
Well, this education is an investment. It doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take an educated person to know that.
We were very upset too that, our parents has to come to the conclusion that they're punishing us. These little children are the core of Guyana's future. There are future presidents and engineers and doctors and political leaders and educators. And for them to have to put us in a corner where we're playing Russian roulette with them, whereas we either put them into the public school and wait until our government can really and truly put some good infrastructures up and good curriculum in place for these children to be learning anything and keeping up with the private schools as well, or put them in the private schools and make more sacrifices, make added sacrifices to the ones that we're already making.
I think, Chris, as well, it's interesting to reflect on, why was this done? And then you look at the response in the media, and apparently there's some big deficit. Well, if there's a deficit, then you cut expenses, look at where the money is being spent, and then start to raise money in a legitimate way, not through tax.
This comes to my question, Mr. Christopher Ram. I know that you're one of the most recognized auditors they are. Our government, and this question is right up your field, our government claims that they cannot afford to drop the tax on education. My question to you is that, can we generate this income anywhere else other than education?
When you see, I must congratulate you on your courage. Normally, I ask the questions, right? But look, this is hundreds of billions of dollars budget.
Yes.
You're talking about $50 million at the most.
Yeah.
I'm glad I anticipated your question. If we saved $1 out of every $400 in expenditure, we make up that money.
Yeah.
If we save 0.625 of our capital expenditure, now you're hearing that, we're wasting 20% on our capital expenditure. If you save just over 0.5% of your capital expenditure, you make up that $350 million.
Yeah.
If you increase tax revenue by 0.3%, 0.3%, you recover the entire $350 million in your tax revenue, excluding VAT.
Yeah.
But worse, let me give you some more figures. I sat on the tax reform committee. I've taken blows, we take the blows with it. We said in the tax reform committee, excise tax on tobacco and alcohol should be taxed. I did some numbers today. If you were to tax tobacco at 20% over what it is now, and alcohol, domestic and export at 10%, and you say that there is a decrease because of consumption, because of the price, like what will happen to you, numbers will drop. If you make the assumption there's a 5% drop in the use of alcohol and tobacco, and I'm not sure that that's such a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We should be glad if that were to happen. You would make double the amount of revenue that you are going to get out of this tax.
Yeah.
Double the amount, $777 million, and we're talking about $350 million.
Chris, if I was a politician and I sat down and read through those 1,500 comments on our petition, why would you possibly want to encourage that if you're serious about governing this country and want to be re-elected? You've made yourself so unbelievably unpopular, and to raise how much money?
That's the question, to raise how much.
It's just so illogical.
But they have recommendations on this tobacco and alcohol, and completely ignores it.
And it will fall greatly in Minister Ramjatan's
and he's the chairman of one of the political parties.
Yes, because
he talks about, we're drinking too much alcohol.
Exactly.
Well, do something about it, Mr. Ramjatan.
Tax it more.
Tax it more.
So you can see the options available, and what I mentioned here, Ms. Gowkarran, what I mentioned here are single efforts. What you could do, you could take a little bit from here and a little bit from there. In other words, each of these measures, the money is there. I really believe, and I must say, I've known the Minister of Finance for years and years. I have great personal respect for him. I think he's been caught by surprise. This may have even been an omission, although I can't quite say that, because when the budget came out first, it was to tax medical services as well as education services.
Yeah.
It has been removed on medical services, but not on education.
Yeah.
So one has to say that if there was an oversight or an omission, it's no longer true because you would have acted in the same way on education as you acted in relation to medical.
Yeah, yeah,
So the money is clearly there.
yeah.
And I know I talk to a few ministers. Not a lot take calls anymore. Not a lot listen to you. But what I find surprising, at an individual level, they don't agree with this.
But
That's what I find surprising.
But I think the point you just made, Chris, is really important. That I'm not a politician. I've no desire to be. That we got calls from a number of different political parties who wanted to jump on the bandwagon once it was moving in a nice direction. But I feel that it was a mistake, and now it's do they have the humility now to stand down and say, okay, now we realise it's a mistake, and now we want to move forward. And I think that's what President Granger maybe tried to do a couple of weeks ago. And then, unfortunately, someone or some bodies managed to change his mind. And now the hope is that they'll look again and realise, as they did early on with the medical fees, and realise, let's go and look at tobacco and alcohol and a couple of other areas.
Or just cut expenditure,
Yeah, absolutely.
$1 out of every $400.
Yeah. I'm
What
sure
is
there's
that?
lots of places that
Oh my
expenditures
God!
can be cut.
Every single ministry can make a contribution
Yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
do, and I come back. It does not need an educated person to do this.
Excuse me.
I attended the demonstration outside the Ministry of Education today. I noticed students from the University of Guyana.
Yes.
What did you realize they were UG students in that?
Some of them
Protest.
identified themselves. Some of them identified.
What did they say were their problems with the?
That they're going to be taxed. Well, not taxed. Their fees will be increased. That was their terms.
Their fees are going to be increased by
Yes.
35% over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Starting with September, there's going to be a 15% increase. Then in January, another 10%, and in January 2019, another 10%. So they're in a worse off position actually than these private schools.
Yeah.
And what some of them have realized, because I teach at the University of Guyana, some of them have realized that their fees are taxable. The fees payable by the university to the University of Guyana are vatable. There's no question about it. But if I were you people, I wouldn't make too much of a fuss, because if the government does not, if the university does not impose VAT, then there's a clear case for the court. This would be an act of discrimination.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But you know, Chris, when we were doing the petition, our sixth formers reached out to bishops, queens, and Stanislas, and the hope was that it's not us fighting to save money for ourselves, but it's an issue of social justice.
Yes.
So we were delighted that many kids from the government schools signed that petition, supported it. So it's not just people who
Have
feel
children.
that they're going to have to pay some kind of added burden.
And we are nowhere trying to blame our teachers in the public school system with these protests. We're not trying to have them feel bad about the situation, because we know that they are not given the adequate material. We're not giving the adequate material, or they don't have staff rooms, they don't have IT rooms, they do not. Most of these teachers comes out of their own pockets to do photocopying and get material for their class. So we're nowhere blaming our teachers. We know they're not paid well. That's without question. So I don't want. We were even calling on them to come out and support us in our protests.
I had a conversation with Swami Aksharananda, who was also, he's an educator. He operates a school on the west bank of Demerara. One of his fears, and I think he had a wonderful letter. Was it today or yesterday?
Yes, it was in today's.
Yes, a wonderful letter, and highly in praise of President Granger and President Granger's commitment to education. One of their great fears, one of Swami's great fear, is that if the government persists with this, there is going to be a dropout
Yeah.
from these primary schools.
Some parents can't, they simply cannot afford it. And what happens when parents now has to choose between, if they have 3 and 4 children, and they have to choose which one of these children they're going to send to a private school and which one of these children they're going to put in a government school? What happens in that household with favoritism and the social backlash it has on them? It's more than just about cannot affording it at this point in time. It has so much more of a rippling effect.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. There was no assessment done to look at the impact it has on society, placing the VAT on education. It will result in more crime, more school dropouts, more poverty, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it will certainly contribute to unemployment and people being totally unemployable.
Exactly.
Yes, you're dooming somebody to poverty,
Yeah.
and whatever
For sure.
else goes
Yeah.
with poverty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's no question of that. I mean, to contend that is just totally illogical. And that, again, was in one of the letters in the media saying, well, one of the leaders in support of this 14% was saying, well, you know, we have no evidence that people will drop out. I mean, that's such a naive thing to say, to think that you're going to tax someone another 14% and it's not going to hit them.
Well, what I will, in my simple common sense way, assuming I have common sense, if you were to ask, the Minister of Finance has said the school should absorb this VAT.
Yeah.
Now, that's a 12% reduction from your gross income.
Yeah,
Which business
absolutely.
can any ministry of this government, any single ministry,
Yeah.
survive on a
Yeah.
12%
Yeah.
reduction
Yeah.
of their subvention? It
But-
can't be. It makes no sense.
No, but of course that's a clever thing to say, just to stir up disunity. Yeah, and it's this image. Well, I was on a radio program, and assaulted by the interviewer saying, "You're making so much money. You
Exactly.
absorb it.
This is-
We already pay almost 40% tax. How much tax do you think is reasonable for the school to pay? It's impossible for the school to pay another 14%.
And
If you want quality, if
But-
you want to greatly reduce that quality,
and
then
with, and with that being put out there, our parents as well, when they see these things being aired and these conversations are circulating, these statements are circulating, they are now sitting there and wondering to themselves, why is it that the schools cannot absorb the VAT? But they are not looking at it from a business perspective.
But that is so,
Exactly.
I don't normally, I'm not normally a very calm person. It is so idiotic to suggest that. The whole idea of VAT
yeah,
was to widen the tax base.
yeah, yeah,
Now you're saying,
Yeah.
no, don't worry about widening it.
yeah, yeah.
Let somebody else pay it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I'd be happy. Okay, we'll pay it, and then when I go now to buy building materials, I'll tell the person, okay, you pay the VAT. I mean, it's such. It doesn't make any sense.
And also, if these people were to do it, we already say because of the elasticity of demand for your services, persons will drop out. You still have your fixed costs. You need to pay that teacher whether 3 children drop out tomorrow or not. You will have less profit, so there's less revenue to the government. It is so counterproductive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And they're being very insensitive when they're saying these things as well, because we have parents asking us and putting the statement out there, if our ministers do not send their children or grandchildren they do not trust their public system to send their children to the public schools, then why should we be penalized for having the same faith? It comes back to it being such a biased decision as well.
I think we're all exasperated by it, and you are trying to see, is there a logical argument? Can we respond to that logical argument? We now have been on this for 6-7 weeks. I haven't heard one logical argument in support of it, not one.
So,
Sorry.
sorry.
What is also I've noticed is that anyone from the international community, like the UN or the human rights or anybody, came out and say anything about this. I mean, surely they would have something to say about it. Guyana is well, from my knowledge, the first country in the Caribbean that has ever placed tax on education.
Well, probably
And in the
wider
first
than
world country.
Caribbean.
And
Go to impoverished countries in Africa.
Well,
Yeah,
I can
that's
tell
not what
you,
they do.
since the history of taxation, there's never, and this is over 100 years ago,
Never been taxed
a
on
100
education.
years, there has never been a tax like this on education. We've had service tax, we've had consumption tax, we've had
Yeah.
various forms of production taxes, and even taxes on services. We've never had a tax like this.
Yeah. You know, Chris, on that petition that we did, we got comments from Kenya, Rwanda, Iran, Egypt, from 40 different countries saying they're amazed. You know, they look on from afar and they look and say, what is Guyana doing? And we do all this on the cups of one of the biggest oil finds in the world. I mean, where's the
Well, the
logic in
Well,
international-
that?
in 2015, it was the biggest.
Yeah, and the reward for the people of Guyana is further hardship with the VAT on private education.
But you did say that it defies
It does.
all logic, it
Totally
defies
does.
intelligence, it defies
Yeah,
common sense.
Yeah. I mean, let's have an open debate. I would be more than delighted to share a panel like this with the people who believe in this. I'm not quite sure who they are, but I think that would be a very interesting debate. Let's try to do that the next program, Chris. Invite them.
Well, they don't accept invitations. I after Mr. Raphael Trotman won the leadership of the AFC, I invited him. He said he had a commitment. I have not been able to get. I've invited the president a number of times, and these are persons, you know. When they were in opposition,
Yeah.
oh my God, they rush you to come on the program. Now, not a single one, other than Kemra Ramdatan, has been on this program. Moses Nagamut, who talks, all of that. You know, I've extended open invitations.
Perhaps if the elections were a bit closer, then they would.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know how politicians think, Dr. Toes.
Yeah, at this point, you know, we have today's protest. We closed off with our national anthem and our national pledge. I got a comment, we received a comment asking us, why did we do that? You know, we're not trying to derail the government by this. We're not trying to tell them that, listen, we're not all, we are for you making progress with our country. We're all for you bettering our economy, but you cannot do that on the broken backs of our citizens. There is only so much that we can give at this point in time. There is only so much that we can give up at this point in time. Cost of living has gone so far up as well. You know, and we have to, when we're talking about this private education, a lot of people are thinking that we're just targeting the rich people. They're not. We're targeting poor people. We're targeting middle class people. And I really want them to understand that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that Cindy made, that this is a totally apolitical movement, that all of us have resisted the attempts by political parties to make political capital out of this. That's not our intention. It's a single issue that we're fighting, and we're hoping that there'll be an honest examination of what these issues are.
But listen, this tax was announced since what? It was December 28th? Sorry, November 28th. Your petition started early in 2017.
As soon as we heard about it,
Yeah.
our sixth formers got on and
So,
And again, with that petition, we as parents and other school administration thought that, you know, with what Dr. O'Toole was doing, that this would have opened their eyes to see how of a rippling effect it would have on our economy, on our children and our parents. But it really and truly didn't. And that is the part that they didn't show any empathy towards the situation, none at all. They just made insensitive comments one after the other about our way of life and what we drive.
But it's clearly having an impact. I got a call a couple of days ago from someone in Rockstone, you know, an Amerindian village I know well, to say that
that is the
way down
Oh,
by past Linden,
Linden,
tiny
yes,
little
yeah.
community, saying that one of the political leaders was there, bad mouthing what we're doing. And this poor Amerindian guy phones me up and says, yeah, what's all this about? He had no clue what this 14% VAT was about, and yet that was a forum that was used to decry this attempt to remove the 14% VAT.
Well, you mentioned that this tax was announced earlier, and the reason why anyone hasn't came out and started protesting in the streets earlier is because of what School of the Nations had
was
done,
doing, yeah.
and with the petition. And then we heard news via the media that well, the president is to announce that there will be a removal of that on education, and then subsequently, I think it's 2 or 3 days after, there was another announcement saying that there would be no removal of that. And then that is when I think the Guyana Private Schools United started. And that's how we have moved to this action currently, because apparently, taking a note from the parking meter people, is basically this is how the government reacts. They don't want to listen to you calmly, or have a meeting with you, or sit down privately and discuss the matter, but rather have everyone outraged on the streets protesting, and then they react.
In that case, you take the matter to them if they don't want to come to you. But which brings us back to the whole question of the nature of our country. Our Constitution says that we must have a say in the matters that affect our well-being and our livelihood.
Yeah.
We don't have that.
And here it is, you've got a petition, and the president has had it, as you said, over 2 weeks, and nothing he's done, nothing. He should compel his Minister of Finance, his Minister of Education. That's what he should do. So it's not a question of passing the buck.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose cynically, unfortunately, the hope is that people will run out of energy, will get tired of standing in the sun, and this will be a
Another
good test.
protest, yeah.
Do the cynics win, or does the integrity win out at the end? And God knows which one is going to win. I hope it's not the cynics, because
Well,
that would be such a
Well,
commentary.
well,
on Guyana.
let me put that question to you. What next? You had a very creative advertisement in today's newspapers. I thought I saw some tears running down some of the children's eyes, and that advert is very creative indeed. You've had a pretty successful protest. What next?
Well, at this point...
You seem to be in the center of it.
I know, but I'll let Dr.
No,
O'Toole
I mean-
take the lead on this one.
I mean, I think we waited now for that meeting with Minister Rupnarayan. I mean, it was tabled a couple of weeks ago that he would get back to us. He hasn't. Now I know that one of the members from this coalition is going to ask him when is that meeting. I'm not sure quite what that meeting will achieve, because it's not the Minister of Education that can make the change. It clearly is with finance. And my fear is that we've just been fobbed off from one place to
But
another.
he can go to the president and say, "Look,
But in
I am
one of them-
convinced. I am convinced by the arguments of these people. If he has been convinced already,
But
and he can go and he can say he is a joint leader of a party in this coalition.
yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't want to personalize it, because I
This
think
is not personalizing. He's the minister.
I know, no, I accept that, but any one of them can do that. We spoke to another one of our students, one of Roodi's colleagues, who's a member of parliament. We said, yeah, why didn't you stand up? He says, well, the system doesn't work like that. He says, well, the system requires you to have some integrity. If it means you resign, then you should resign.
Yeah, but as
show
we
some
said,
guts on this issue.
as we said, it's the president has an obligation. He's there. Yes, indeed, the code protects the constitution, but the president is the chief executive of this country. He's at the center of the democratic institutions of this country under Article 50.
Yeah.
So he can't pass the buck. Dr. Rupnarayan can't pass the buck. He's the Minister of Education, and he should go to the Minister of Finance, go to the President. He goes to the Minister of Finance and says, look, I am convinced about this case, and I would ask that you remove it.
Yeah.
They go to the next thing, should be Cabinet. If it still can't work, he goes to the President and says, look, I can't be part of this government that could be so irrational, unreasonable, and discriminate in this matter.
Yeah,
And
it's going to take integrity at that level for change to come about,
And-
and it would be fascinating to see if somebody does arise. And I'm not sure if that's the appetite that a lot of politicians have, but if they do, God bless them.
I'd like to say also that during the campaign season in 2015, when it was coming up to general elections, the current administration, when they were campaigning, all of them were saying that, oh, the youths are the future of the country. We need to do all we can for the youth. We have a high employment rate, and we're going to do everything to change that and everything. And then as soon as you're in government, you forget all those promises, and you go and you put tax on education.
And I know our first lady, she's the voice of the children at this point in time. So we're calling out to her as well. We're informing her that we want her to take a stand on this matter as well, to speak for our children, for our children's education, their right to a proper education.
Yeah, now is the time to show leadership. And
Yes.
let's see if someone has the courage to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's now a very touchy topic where us as parents will now we will lose hope in our acting political government. We will lose hope, we will lose any faith in them at this point in time, that they have put us in a position where we have to make these very, very difficult choices, and we have to put our children, our children need education it's at a risk, because some of the parents who cannot afford it, who simply cannot afford it, will take them out.
Sorry, Cindy, the level of cynicism that this is going to generate in the country isn't worth $1 of the taxes that they're raising.
So we just want to let them know, that
Yeah,
where we
I
stand.
I just wanted to mention to you, young man, don't trust the politician. I've been around for 71 years, and I've seen them in opposition, and when in opposition, they're one thing, they tell you one thing. They're a pack of dishonest people most of the time.
Okay, thank you for the
They
advice.
really don't. Most of the time, they don't mean what they say.
I'd just like to use the opportunity to call on the government again to reconsider your position and really think about the implications this would have on society.
Well,
And please stand for our children, stand for
Yeah.
the future of Guyana. These children are the core success of Guyana's future.
But what I think, the movement against parking meters shows you what the power still lies in the hands of the people.
Yeah.
That's what democracy means, the people, not the politician.
Yes.
And if you are satisfied, there's a justice, there's a reason, there's morality in your case, and you're willing to stand up, you yourselves have got to provide the leadership. Leadership doesn't only come from politicians. In fact, it seldom does.
But speaking on behalf for the students, basically, we will continue to protest until we get a favorable answer, which is no tax on education, no VAT.
We
remove
have
it
our
completely.
students, we have our
Yeah.
tertiary students, we have our parents, and we have all of our administration by our side. So the fight, the protest will continue, and hopefully it will not lose any momentum.
And maybe the students should look and see which schools are not part of it and why. If I was a part of one of the schools has played no part in the petition, no part in this coalition, I'd say, well, I'm not very proud of that
Yes.
institution, and I'm not sure I want to be part of it.
Maybe Dr. O'Toole, the message may not have gone out. I had a call today from a private school, and they invited me to speak on value-added tax and this tax on education, and I said, well, do you know there's a group and there's a protest, and they said they did not know. So they indicated. So I don't think I think if this message of it, obviously protest takes effort, it takes money. As
Well,
parents,
for-
as administrators, this is not what you should be spending your time doing.
No,
No.
It is so
Definitely not.
counterproductive.
Yes.
absolutely.
I have two little girls at home, and this is taking a lot of time away from them.
They're probably looking at you.
Yes, they probably are.
There's my mommy.
Well, for those people that don't know about our protests and our efforts, there's a Facebook group. If you go on Facebook, it's Guyana's Private School
Schools
United.
United.
You can join there, and you'll be kept up to date
Updated.
with
Every
everything
single
there.
thing that's
Yeah.
going on, and the progress we're
Yeah.
making.
I mean,
Yeah.
I find that very surprising that anybody who is from any kind of recognized private school is not aware of what's been happening.
Exactly.
What kind of social world are they in?
Yeah.
Because it's been on the news. Our first protest was broadcasted all over the media.
Yeah, it's
Any
widely
form-
covered.
No,
Any-
the activity today, they weren't aware of it.
Oh, okay.
That's what
No.
I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
That's
the
not
Facebook group, if
specific.
they need to join the Facebook
You know,
page.
there's another dimension to this, and I think it became apparent that some kids who go to private schools, their fees are financed from remittances from abroad.
Yes.
Plenty.
Some of the schools we have, some of the private education, they bring in foreign exchange in this country.
Chris, can I just mention on that we run a pro bono school in Berbice, 130 students, sometimes 180 students, primarily funded by scholarships from Canada. I went and met with those people that give those scholarships a couple of weeks ago in about 6 different cities in Canada, and I said, thank you for your support. We now have a 14% tax. They said, thank you very much. We're going to go to Myanmar and send our scholarship money there. Simple as that.
So there's a loss of foreign
foreign
exchange
exchange.
involved.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because if your own government is taxing us on education, why would anybody
Because
want
those
to
people want to support
support
kids
kids?
in school. They don't want to support the government.
No, I mean, they couldn't believe it. They thought they misunderstood me. I had meetings in different parts all over Ontario.
Especially when most of these parents, these poor parents that are not financially rich, you're not rich like
Well off?
Yeah, they're not very well off. These parents, in their mind, education is the one wealth that they can give to their children that will never leave them even after they do. It is the one thing that they will. It is the one thing that they will give to their children that would take them out of a lifelong poverty as well.
So they just get us clear because the operator is signaling. This you will have another protest action.
Yes, we will continue
This
the
will
protest.
continue.
Yeah,
Yes.
this will continue until we hear something definite from the minister or the government.
Dr. Brian O'Toole, Ms. Savita Gowkarran, Mr. Roodi Balgobin, I want to thank you very much for appearing on Plain
Thank you
Talk.
for having us.
Thanks, Chris.
This program, viewers, will be shown again on Sunday evening on WRHM around 5:30 to 6, and thereafter it will be on YouTube. But I'll see you again next week. Until then, good night and God bless.